Hey, business communication students. I thought with us passing midterm and getting into the second half of the semester, it might be a good idea for us to have kind of a state of the class, little mini video type thing. It's not my intention that this would take too long, but as we've got midterm grades that are submitted, you might be wondering, okay, based on where I'm at, how am I doing? What do I have left to do? What's possible for me? And so I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, and I hope that it's kind of helpful to go through it and kind of know just where you're at. To do that, I thought it would be kind of good to go back to sort of the beginning of the semester and talk a little bit about the grade breakdown, or the categories for where we get grades and things like that. So far this semester, most of our grades have come from small assignments that fit into these kind of larger categories. The biggest one being the memos, letters, and written projects, and that includes obviously like the major letter and memo projects, the email projects, the job application project. That all goes into there. And so as you can see, we've gone through about 235 of the 300 points that we're going to for the semester. As far as quizzes and tests, and for us, it's really just quizzes because we're not really doing tests this semester. We're about halfway through on that. That's obviously those chapter review quizzes. And sometimes I sprinkle in a couple of my own creation as well. And that'll continue a little bit. We're about halfway through on that. Presentations, so far those have been related to our talks, right? The blog talk, the rationale talks, that kind of stuff. And so those have been going pretty well overall. When people do it, they usually get full points on that. But as you can see, we've got about half to go on that too. And most of that's going to be related to a project towards the end of the semester, which I'll tell you about later. And then participation is kind of funky because it's set up as a weighted grade, meaning that there are going to be a lot more assignments that go into that category than there are actually points. I think if you look at it right now, it says that we've got 100 points for it, and we'll always have 100 points for it, is kind of the trick on that. So depending on where you're at, that one will fluctuate probably percentage-wise, but it will always be worth 100 points, which is a little funky. It makes some of the calculations just a little bit inexact, but it'll all kind of work itself out when we get to the end of the semester. And then the final thing is the blog project, which we finished up as a part of midterm. And again, if people did it, they did really, really well on it. All in all, and again, this is not exactly exact because again, that participation category is a little funky, but we've basically gone through a little bit over half of the points, about 540 points of the 1,000 points for the semester, which is really important. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. Now, as far as what's left, again, this is not exact. You'll be like, wait a second, the points don't add up. That's again because of that participation category. So again, sorry if that's a little confusing, but try not to get too focused on that. The main thing you need to know is just what we have left in some of those other categories. A couple more points towards memos, letters, and written projects. Again, about 50 of those points you're actually going to wrap up this week with some of the things that I've posted on there. Quizzes and tests, that's we've got a bunch more of those to do. Again, mostly just going to be chapter review quizzes. Presentations, we've got a little bit more to go with that. Again, that's going to be kind of tied up mostly in the final end of the semester project. Participation is always fluctuating, again, as I explained on the last slide. There's an interview project that we'll get to. I'll share more information with you about that pretty soon, but it's kind of the natural follow-up to the resume job letter steps. And then the big thing, what we'll be spending a lot of time working on through the rest of the semester, starting next week, is the research/team-based project. As you can see, that's 200 points. Now, that's not going to be 200 points for one document. There are going to be a couple of documents embedded within that, but 200 points are going to go towards that. So big assignment, group project thing happening there. Before anybody gets apprehensive about that, believe me, I know that there are concerns about things like group projects because you're like, oh man, how do, I don't want to have to do a lot, or I don't want my grade to depend on someone else. I've got a pretty good system that allows me to give credit where credit is due through use of reflection and feedback about who did what, and kind of separating out different tasks. Also, just in general, I've kind of collected data about this through the last, 5 or 6 years that I've been running this project. Most of the time, people are more concerned about their grade dropping as a result of a team project than what actually happens. In fact, in all but maybe one semester that I've run the team project, everybody's grade as they got into the team project either stayed the same or got better. I always kind of keep track of that just to see, okay, so-and-so had an A here and then oh no, they dropped down to a B. It actually doesn't happen as much as you might think it does. So usually what happens is that team projects actually lift people up because you have a better accountability system. You can go to them for help if you're unclear about something. It's a little bit, more convenient that way. And there's just more, camaraderie and collaboration. Obviously, being online, that's changed a little bit. And sometimes people struggle with that. Based off of what I went through last spring, but it's going to be a good experience. And being very, very honest, it's going to be a very realistic experience. We're entering a time where work is going to be done probably in a lot of cases still virtually, just because employers have found through this last year that it's an option. That the employees have access to these things and they've gotten some practice with it through Zoom meetings and Google Docs and other kind of shareable formats. So doing a group project virtually is going to be a good experience for what you will probably have to do at some point. All right, so that's what we have as far as remaining work goes. It says 560 points, but it's not technically 560 points. It's kind of more like maybe around 510, but again, because that participation grade is weighted the way that it is, it's just a little funky. Here's kind of like the so what, so what does this mean now? What do you need to know as far as like goal setting stuff? And again, this isn't 100% exact just because that participation grade is a little funky, but if you kind of keep this in mind, this will get you pretty close to what you need to do. So there are 1,000 points in our class. That's the way that I've got it set up. And so to get to an A- or a 90%, you have to reach 900 points by the end of the semester. And then it just kind of follows from that. You can look and see how many points you have, and you're like, oh, okay, by the end of the semester, I've just got to get, like 400 more points, and I'll get to the A. And, the rest of the grades kind of correspond to that. If you get like 930 points, then that would be an A, no minus, But just the general idea is that, if you get to that 900 points, then you're going to get at least in the A range. And then if you're not able to get up to 900, if you're kind of between 800 and 900, then you're going to get, in that B range and so on and so forth. Now, what does that mean as far as, kind of the lower end? Well, I mean, we have to be realistic about this, right? And I want to be very, very transparent. So you can kind of take your current point totals on Blackboard, and it'll give you an idea of what you need to earn, mathematically speaking, to reach your desired grade. And the truth is that if you're, below a certain threshold, it's going to be mathematically impossible. Now, there are, a couple of extra credit points here and there. There are workshops and things like that you can do to earn a couple of points, but those are small points. Those are not going to be like, the difference between 2 letter grades or something like that, right? There's no way it's like, oh man, I'm at a C. What do I do to get an A? Well, it might be pretty difficult just based off of the points. So anyway, I've got some numbers up there. If you're currently at 440 points or lower, that means you have missed projects or done poorly on projects or whatever the case may be, so much so that mathematically it's not possible to get to an A. And then the same thing kind of just keeps going, regardless of what your grade is right now, you can't, if you have less than 340 points, you're not going to be able to get to a B. If you have less than 240 points, you're not going to be able to get to a C, which means you're not going to be able to pass the class. Although there are some programs where you can pass the class still if you have a D, but the C is really what you want to get to. And so that's all to say, if you're in D or F range, but above some of these totals, it means that you absolutely can pass the class, but you got to do really, really well in the second half. So regardless, what I would really recommend, this is true for everybody, but especially if you're in the D or F range currently, I would strongly recommend that you contact me to set up a meeting time. We can make a plan of attack for the rest of the semester. And my kind of overall suggestions, this is true for everybody, but especially if anybody's looking at their midterm grade and they're like, man, I am not happy with this. This is a lot worse than I thought I was going to be doing at this point. One thing I want to just kind of remind everybody is that as far as business communication goes, the details really, really matter. Right? And I've talked about this since day one, about how important it is to get the word choice right, how important it is to get, even the minor stuff, the formatting, the spelling, we want to avoid as many typos and errors and things like that as possible. And this is especially true because I noticed on a lot of the job applications that people would say stuff like, well, I'm really detail oriented. And then they would have a typo right next to that. Truth is that because these documents are so much shorter than like your traditional English 101 papers and stuff like that, then the kind of flip side to that is just that we have to make sure that the details are really, really good. You know, every word needs to be considered basically. So attitude and goodwill strategies are just so critical. Concise writing is really critical too. Instead of trying to make it longer, let's see if we can make it shorter and still convey the main point. I mean, that's a really valuable skill, something I still work with all the time. So be detail oriented, proofread, and take your time. That's the one thing that I've seen people slipping on a little bit, I think, is that they sometimes think, okay, it's just got to be like a paragraph long, about half a page. They type it up on Sunday and then submit it on Sunday. And, you know, you can kind of tell based off of the timestamps and then, you know, just kind of the general quality of the work. That's probably what happened with some of these. You know, they just rushed a little bit. It happens every once in a while. You know, it happens to me all the time, but we got to try not to let it happen as much as possible. Along the same lines, get in contact with me. My contact information, of course, is up there. I'm Norman at binu.edu, the virtual office hours. So far, only a couple of people have actually reached out to me, you know, during office hours, and really only a couple of emails even. I mean, and that's okay if you're doing well, but if you're not doing well, let's change that, because that's something where, you know, you don't need to struggle on your own and figure this out and then you're like, oh man, I totally misunderstood it or whatever. You know, get in contact at the first sign of any question or ambiguity. And of course, if that doesn't work for you, you know, if you're for whatever reason just think you would like a kind of an outsider perspective, we have a lot of tutoring labs on campus. I would just remind you about the two that are in the Shercliffe Humanities building, the Writing Center, which is upstairs in E229. That's probably the best one because it's run by somebody who teaches English 205. And there is also the Academic Skills Lab. And then there's also virtual tutoring opportunities, including through the Writing Center. So you can, you know, follow the instructions on Blackboard to get that straightened out. But the main thing that I want to tell you guys, and this is true for absolutely everybody, is just don't wait. Don't wait until it's too late. Be proactive. If you realize that you're slipping a little bit, don't say, okay, well, you know, next week I better really get on this. Now, let's make a plan of attack. Let's get going on this. Let's change some things. You know, for anybody that's kind of like, oh no, I'm too embarrassed. I've really messed up the first half of the semester. I don't want to admit it. I don't want to, you know, look like a fool. Don't worry. I'm not going to think that you're a fool. I'll be really happy that you decided, you know what, this first half of the semester didn't go exactly the way that I wanted to, but I'm ready to finish strong. Let's finish strong. Let's do the very best that we can with the second half of the semester. Even if you did well, I think everybody agrees that there's always room for improvement. And so I want to help however I possibly can. So make use of me and make use of all the resources that are on Blackboard and all the resources that are available to you through Vincennes University. There's no shame in that. You know, in a year or 2 years or whatever, it won't matter. None of that will matter except that you get through the class and you get your degree. That's what will matter. Just remember that I'm always available to help. Remember that you can reach out to me. As always, let's stay safe and stay healthy and stay as positive as possible.